Hello, so in this video we're going to be describing your school uniform in French. It's in the context of the GCSE topic for current study when you're talking about rules in school. Because it's at GCSE level, I won't spend much time at all talking about the individual words for clothes. I will assume you have a vocabulary sheet that you can use for this, and if you want to do a search on YouTube for more videos that go individually through each item of clothing, you can do that separately. This is going to be example sentences for how to talk about your school uniform in general, so to describe it and to give your opinion, and how to improve statements, so with opinions and reasons in particular, but I'll give you some other examples. As usual, if you have your vocab sheet with you, it's going to be quite useful. At the very least, if you can't print it, have some paper and a pen so you can take some notes and add it later. And I will ask you several questions and say you should pause and answer them yourself on paper and then check your answers after. So firstly, let's have a look at the verb you'd be using. It's the verb porter, which is a regular ER verb in French. So pause now and try and fill out the rest of this table in French correctly and have a think about the bit that I underlined and what should happen when you have those subjects. Okay, I assume you've paused now, so let's have a look at the answers. So to say I wear, you can say je porte with an E at the end. You wear, if you're talking about one person, it's informal. You're going to say tu portes, es. He, she, or we wear. You're going to say il, elle, or on porte with an e. We wear, another way of saying it would be nous portons. So you might be talking about in my school we wear, for example. You wear when you're talking about a group of people or you're talking to a person, you're being formal. You would say vous portez. And then they wear, so you might be describing schools in France, for example. You'd say il porte and elle porte, ent. So those are your regular er verb endings. So let's stick with je porte because you'll be describing your own uniform. Although, as I said, if you want to add more complexity and therefore get more marks in your description, I would recommend possibly either saying on porte or nous portons at some point, and perhaps even il porte in France or Canada, for example. The vocab sheet that you have will have a long list of clothes, so some will apply to uniforms, some less so. So for example, a swimming suit, and I put at the top je porte just to remind you how to make a sentence. In this case, you would just simply use the verb and plus what is in the list here. Je porte des baskets, je porte une blouse, je porte un bonnet, etc. So I wear trainers, I wear a blouse, etc. Now, obviously, I put the little or here to remind us we always want to give a bit more detail. If you just say to describe your uniform, I wear trousers and a shirt, that is quite simple, and we want to improve this. The first thing you could do to add to it would be to add an adjective. You could say, I wear an expensive uniform, an expensive hat. Je porte un bonnet cher. For example, je porte une chemise classique. I wear a classic shirt. You may have noticed I've got 3 little dots here. That's because in the adjectives, those ones at the top act as adjectives, but they're not strictly adjectives, because as you know, adjectives must agree with nouns that they modify, or with pronouns that they modify. Être, 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 être. So with this song, hopefully you've remembered. So adjectives, you would have to agree. If you are describing something which is feminine, you would add an E. And if you're describing something that is plural, décollant, for example, you would add an S. So all of those below those 3 dots will be affected. They will need to agree. The ones that are above, you will have noticed, they're all more than one word, so they're normally 2 words, and they're acting as adjective in the sense that they're adding a detail on the noun, but they're not agreeing like an adjective would. So you wouldn't add an E to en coton or en laine, etc. So just to recap then, we've got these 2 categories. The one at the top, all of those are what's called invariable, so they don't change whatever it is that you're describing. And the ones below, they have to agree with the subject, the noun they're describing, in gender, so masculine or feminine, and in number, so singular or plural. So something else that you can do to add detail to this is to add color. And in fact, I would strongly recommend you add color as part of your description. So there in box number 4, they'll be more obviously visible on your own sheet. So for example, if I wanted to say, I wear a black shirt, you could pause now and write it out and see if you got it right. Je porte une chemise noire. So I actually put this arrow. You could do the same on your own sheet, probably a curved one, because it's in the right order. Of course, colors in French come after the noun they describe. Most adjectives do. Je porte une chemise noire. You could even, some adjectives that are here go in front. So petit, for example, goes in front. So you could say je porte une petite chemise noire, for example. So just be wary, you already have your sheet on adjectives in your resources. And then you could use those adjectives there, for example. So I could say, je porte une chemise noire serrée, tight. So let's do a very quick recap on colors. So just to remind you how to write them in the feminine version, because you'll often need to do this. So you could pause now and try to fill out the box on the right and see if you get it right. Right, let's continue. So feminine of noir, you add an E. Feminine of bleu, you add an E. Gris, grise. Vert, verte. Brun, brune. Blanc, blanche. So this one you have to add an H and an E. Violet, violette. So you need an extra T as well as an E. Marron, marron. Stays the same. Jaune, jaune. Orange, rose, rouge. So I put them in a similar order in your list. So the ones at the top, you simply add an E. The ones at the bottom never change. And the ones in the middle, you add one letter, so I put an asterisk and an extra E. The ones at the bottom, there are 2 in particular that will not change at all. And then the other 3 will not change for feminine, but they will change for plural. Can you think of which they are? You'll have learned that in year 7. So marron and orange, brown and orange, will not change whether it's for feminine or for plural. There was a good tip to remember why. Can you remember that? So orange and marron are named after food. So a color that is named after a food will not change according to gender or number. Now I put at the bottom foncé and clair, and look at kind of the color I've chosen. So foncé means dark and clair means light. Now, it's good if you want to use those, so you want to say dark green or light gray, for example. But if you want to use them, you need to make sure you use them correctly. When you use foncé and clair, even if the thing you're describing is feminine, you will not add an E or use the feminine version. This is because foncé will kind of reset the color, if you will. So you couldn't say, let's pick violette foncé. You would have to say violet foncé. Okay, so if you want to add this amount of detail, you need to be using the masculine version. Even if the item you are describing is feminine, by adding foncé or clair, you use the masculine. So you're welcome to use them, just make sure you use them correctly. Okay, so this is your current uniform. So you could pause now and write it out in French. So I've pointed at the different items, try and guess what it is, and I've put the number of letters for those bits here. Where you have a number of letters has to do with the color in the description. There might be some you find harder or easier. Do your best, pause now, and listen to the answers after. Right, so let's have a look at the description that I put here. So, au collège, je porte. So, at school, in school, I wear. So here we are pointing at this. Une chemise blanche, a white shirt. And we're pointing at that. Une cravate bleu foncé, a tie blue dark, so dark blue tie. Then we have this here. Un veston bleu foncé. Then what I added, which I think might be a nice one to add, avec le logo du collège, with the logo of the school. Then we continue, and you see, by the way, that bleu foncé is written the same, despite the fact that this is masculine, this is feminine. That's because I used foncé. Right, the ladies would be wearing this one here. Une jupe à carreaux, bleue et grise. So a skirt with checkers, blue and grey. Ou des pantalons gris, or some grey trousers. And finally, so we've got shoes, des chaussures noires. So that would probably be a basic uniform. So most of you will be writing a variation of this. However, you could of course add some adjectives from your sheet to add more complexity and to get more points. You don't necessarily need to add an extra detail to all of them. I would definitely put the color, but beyond this, you could add an extra detail to maybe 3 of them out of 5. Right, let's continue. So the last thing we want to talk about would be to add opinions. I've added our little bookmark at the bottom to remind you about that Oreo, because describing your uniform is simply giving a detail, and we definitely want to add more to this to get more marks. So the most obvious thing is to give your opinion with a reason. I didn't write it here, but you could say j'aime mon uniforme or je déteste mon uniforme. And then we're going to give a reason for this. So you've got a number of reasons here in French that are positive, hence the smiley, and a number of reasons which would be negative, so reasons why you wouldn't like your uniform. You can pause now and try and work it out. You have the answers already, but try to work them out without the answers, and then press play again to see them. So positive answers, positive reasons why you would like it. It's elegant, it's comfortable, it's fashionable, it's practical, it's classical. Egalitarian, it means you're all equals. Or it's fast in the morning. Now, we'll get back to those ones here after. Let's just go to the negative ones, which also start with c'est. So we've got c'est laid, it's ugly. C'est inconfortable, uncomfortable. C'est démodé, out of fashion. C'est cher, it's expensive. C'est trop sévère, it's too strict, or you look too strict as a person. C'est trop chaud, it's too hot. Et c'est difficile à garder propre, it's hard to keep clean. Then let's go to the slightly more complex reasons, the ones that don't start with c'est. On sait quoi mettre le matin, we know what to put on in the morning. Ça cache les différences entre les classes sociales, it hides literally differences between social classes, it hides social differences. Ça améliore la discipline, it improves discipline. Ça donne une image positive du collège, it gives a positive image to the school. Of course, you may not agree with this, but these are the kind of reasons you could be using. And the negative ones, on se ressemble tous, we all look like each other. So a nice little reflexive verb here. Ça limite notre individualité, it limits our individuality. Ça limite la liberté d'expression, it limits our freedom of expression. Of course, you can add others that you can think of. What I would strongly suggest is perhaps you use one easy one and one harder one. Something else I'd like you to consider as part of talking about uniforms is not just to say only positive or only negative things, but to use a connective that would be introducing an opposite idea. For example, let's say that I hate my uniform. I could say, je déteste mon uniforme, c'est laid et cher et on se ressemble tous. But surely there's at least one thing here that you could say, yeah, I kind of agree with that. So I'm going to use a connective that introduces an opposite idea, like cependant, however, ceci étant dit, that being said, malheureusement, unfortunately, whichever one fits the best with what you're going to say, or even a different one. And then you say something else. So I said, c'est laid, cher et on se ressemble tous. Ceci étant dit, c'est plus rapide le matin. So this shows a much higher level of thinking, and it helps you get more marks in your speaking and your writing when you're using these different bits. From here as well, if you want to add something else from that area, which I would recommend, you could be considering tenses. For example, you could say, next year I will not wear a uniform in sixth form, it will be great. Or I preferred in the past the old uniform that we had. It was better. So adding one sentence in a different tense, again, would show more complexity. It doesn't need to be complex in terms of the words you're using, but showing complexity in terms of showing off that you can do different tenses. Okay, so all this put together then will hopefully allow you to describe a uniform with some complexity, but also some range of vocabulary. There we go.